Hello and welcome to this video. Today we're going to be responding and reacting to Jordan Peterson's talk that he made a while back on killing your father in Freud and Jung. So we're going to be looking at this video, analyzing it a bit, and then of course at the end of it giving you our instant thoughts and reactions. And I think you can actually develop this idea of killing your father. Now before we get to it, I'd like to say please don't take this literally and get a shotgun and shoot your parents. That's definitely not what I'm saying. However, I do think it is something which you should think about symbolically, and is definitely something which is valuable. So without further ado, let us get started off and watching the video.
Freud said, for example, that no one could be a man unless his father had died. And Jung said, yes, but that death can take place symbolically. Okay, so there's that part of the idea. And then another part of the idea is, one of the times in your life when you actually realize that you're an individual is when you'll go and ask your parents something and you'll realize they actually don't know any more about what you should do than you do. And that sucks. And that's partly why people are often willing to maintain a tyrant-slave relationship with their father. It's like, on one hand, you have to be inferior in a relationship like that. You know, you've always got the judge watching you. But on the other hand, there's always someone who knows what to do.
So I think there's a few things there before we continue watching the video. I think we can start off with discussing the idea of what it means to kill the father. And of course, here it starts off with perhaps an Oedipal situation in Freud, and it gets developed on to Jung to say, well, actually that can happen symbolically. It's not a physical death. Now, what Jordan Peterson first starts off by talking about is that he says, well, actually, in reality, a lot of times we have this kind of this positive and negative relationship with our parents. There's almost this Chinese kind of conception of the yin and the yang occurring with the parents. On one hand, they represent this symbol of tyranny or this symbol of control, which is tyrannizing and directing your life in perhaps a less than ideal way, and that you're subject to them, and hence you cannot become a man in that sense. However, on the opposite side, you also have the idea of that despite the tyranny, it gives you a framework, it gives you a structure, it gives you a set of morals and rules in which you can follow, and then you don't face that responsibility yourself. That need to overcome challenges by yourself is not there. And to apply that to our current life today, think about it. If you look at your life today, you're either interacting with people, you're talking to people. If you're a high school student, you might realize that actually, no matter what happens in high school, I could always fall back. I have that kind of fallback, that fail-safe option with my parents, because my parents will look after me. They put food on the table. If I mess up a relationship with my teachers, it doesn't mean that I'm going to suddenly get sacked from my job and then lose all my income and then go starving in the street. My parents will take care of it. And the same way it goes symbolically, almost that spiritual food, that guidance, that spiritual nourishment that you might be getting from your parents, that direction, is going to be there to help you and guide you there as well. And it's going to be that path. What truly becomes scary and that challenge to become a man, I suppose, is what happens when you do indeed step onto that path, when you go beyond that path and you're going on the side, when you've killed your father, you've killed the parents symbolically, then you're becoming a man, because now you're all alone and you have to fight and develop it further. And that's kind of the initial thoughts that you can get from this video so far. Let's carry on watching it.
There's always someone standing between you and the unknown that you can go ask, what should I do? Well, at some point, you'll realize that the reason you can't ask that anymore is because they actually don't know any more than you do. And then that's a pain. Like that is a symbolic death. That's also when you establish a more individual relationship with your parents. It's at that point that you could conceivably start taking care of them instead of the reverse.
And that's something which is very interesting, because, of course, there is that kind of reciprocal relationship going on. And in some sense, that stage into university symbolically is kind of that stage of leaving the parents to some degree. And of course, in the past, in the Old Testament, it was this kind of leaving your parents and you will be joined to a wife in one flesh. And of course, those aren't the literal words of the story, but nevertheless, it is that conception of leaving your parents. You're going to university now. The universities that you're going to now is vastly different from the universities in the past. And by stepping beyond that boundary, by stepping into that unknown, what you're then doing is to say, well, actually, now I am taking that step that you guys don't know about. I'm going to take responsibility to success or failure. I'm going to go down that path. And that then becomes a whole new challenge. And it can be terrifying. I mean, I know a lot of people who go to university and really don't know what they're to do. They no longer have that guidance of their parents. And even if the guidance wasn't the best, at least they had that direction. And of course, there's that question, especially I've noticed this mainly among females more so than men. And I'm not sure whether this is psychological. I'm pretty sure it is. I've done a bit of research on it on the past, so I wouldn't say it's necessarily conclusive, but there's almost this idea that there is this guidance principle required to take someone and have them being led on. And I'm not doing this to say, well, some people are more submissive than others, though of course there is scientific evidence and psychological evidence to back that. But there almost is this idea that it is very easy when you have that order to be submissive to it, and you're gaining those values from it. But if you don't have that order, and that's a problem with people who grow up in divorced families, often do not have that order above them, it almost becomes a case that they've gotten to this freedom too early, and without those values to then create your new values, you then collapse, because of course there is this idea of saying, well, can you create those values? And if you cannot, well, where are you meant to go from there? Because think about it. Even if you started off initially without the father, or you start off without that parental figure, that order in your life, well, what are you going to be doing? You don't have that protection. You don't have that guidance. It's very easy when you're looking at Jordan Peterson to say, well, actually, no, let's just kill the father immediately. But that's not necessarily the case. You need to get those values, and you get that framework from the father, learn what is good and what's not good from the father, because of course, no father is perfect. Learn from it, analyze it, and then develop further into your life. And that will become and help you become a man in the long term. Now, I think there's nothing more in this video, so I'll continue analyzing and developing onwards, because I do think that there's an interesting point. It's like, well, after you killed your father, what is the development for? I don't think Freud is correct when he says, well, okay, once you killed the father, once the father is symbolically dead in Jung, well, all right, you become a man. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think there is a further step that must be taken. And that is, of course, seen in the Bible when it says, as I've said, the man will leave his father, well, his parents, and be joined with his wife. There's almost this idea that after you've killed the father symbolically and they've killed the parents symbolically, because let's face it, that joining or that separation from the parents to the wife is indeed a symbolic death of the parents in some sense. They're no longer the restrainers. You are then the parent yourself. There's almost this idea that reciprocating relationship that I'm talking about previously. You become the parent yourself by being joined with the wife. By doing that, you're moving away from that parental relationship, that tyrannical structure in some sense, and then you're moving into a new situation, and then you have the wife. You're joined with the wife, and in some sense, symbolically, that is the joining to an ideal. You become joined with an ideal, and now going from one ideal, you go to the other ideal. And that's something which is seen in the Bible. And of course, Nietzsche then criticizes this in the Antichrist by saying, well, actually, what happens is that Jesus has promoted the moving away from the parents, rule of the parents, to the wife. But actually, in some sense, the church then takes that marital structure and then ties that on into unity and submission to the church. Now that is, of course, a very big problem, because in some sense, and of course, I think Nietzsche saw this very well, is that, well, you've replaced one form of ideal to another form of ideal, and it's not exactly clear where exactly between this journey that you've created your own ideal or created any valuable input into your life apart from the message in the church. And that's something which has to be wrestled with, because it's very easy and it's all well and good to say that actually there is a problem here. I've overcome that tyrannical relationship. I've taken the good from that. I've gotten rid of the evil, and I've challenged the world and have become a man. That's one thing. But to then go into another ideal, you might say, well, actually, I've then adopted even more things, and now I'm back into a tyrannical relationship. And that, of course, is problematic. And I wouldn't necessarily say that someone has become a man just by doing that. So now, how on earth are you meant to go forward? Well, I think the answer is this, and can be formulated as this. You not only have to kill your father and your mother, but almost symbolically, you have to kill that female figure, that ideal as well. And that by murdering that ideal, and of course, I'm not saying just take a gun and shoot them. That's definitely what I'm saying here. But symbolically, you have to get rid of that female ideal as well in order to truly become a man, to truly pursue the truth. And that's not some incel-like statement to say, well, female are the root of evil, and that interpretation of Nietzsche. But rather, it's almost the idea that you have done absolutely nothing by going from your father, your parental structure to the marital structure and the bonds of matrimony. You've just replaced one ideal for another, and you've gotten absolutely nowhere. And that's what Nietzsche is saying, is that woman is the second mistake of God, or something along those lines. I think it's definitely not verbatim, but something along those lines. I definitely think that there is something there of note, and almost it is the idea that you have to kill that second ideal before you're truly faced with abyss, you're truly faced with freedom, and you're truly faced with the tyranny, because let's face it, anyone who's gone from, and I think this is perhaps one of the reasons why people go partying and start hooking up in university, is precisely because they've gone from one set system of structures, one ideal, they've gotten rid of that, And now by going into university, they get another set of ideals, and now they're being influenced by that as well. So you have almost that jump from one ideal to another, and you don't really know which one is better or which one's worse, at least in that situation of the unknown. But whenever you kill both of those ideals, then you're truly faced without an ideal to follow. Then you can base off the good values that you've gotten previously, truly the values which you need going forward, and then you can truly develop into a man. Now, of course, that is a very difficult step to do, and it's a very painful step to do because a lot of our lives is based around comfort and security. And by killing both the father, killing the parents, and killing the woman as well, what you're doing is getting rid of all that security, and you're faced with the abyss. And that's a very dangerous thing to do because you could easily fall astray. However, I think that is what Nietzsche is calling us to do, is to say, well, you have to take that hard path regardless of what it is. It's almost this will to truth is the will to death. It's a hidden will to death idea that you find in Nietzsche. It's almost this idea that you have to challenge it further, break through the ideal, and get to the other side. Now, that is my thought on Jordan Peterson's idea of killing your father, and in substance, not necessarily Jordan Peterson, but also Freud and Jung's idea, and how you can develop it further. If you have any thoughts about that, let me know in the comments below, and I'll happily talk about that with you there. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed it. Also, if you want to support this channel financially, of course, it's not obligatory or anything like that, feel free to check out our Patreon. The link is in the description below. Stay safe, my friends. See you soon. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. I'll see you next one.